Hi, folks. This is Marvin Schneider from Jenuine Healing. I wanted to provide you a quick bit of context to the video clip that I'm about to feature today, related to the topic of the process of enlightenment that Jen Ward went through. And for those that are familiar with Jen and her work, she's a world-renowned energy healer. We've been working tirelessly to uplift all of humanity and heal humanity one soul at a time. We were doing one of our group SFT tapping events called Collapsing the Cyborg Timeline a couple of days ago. And through that event, Jen started talking about the process of enlightenment that she went through. And it was pretty profound. It was a very profound moment. And it was so profound, in fact, that it struck us that we really need to put this together as one integrated clip and make it available on YouTube, on the Jenuine Healing website, on Facebook, and wherever we can get that clip out, because it's so important. There's so much misinformation about the process of enlightenment, and a lot of people in the spiritual community laud the process of enlightenment, but it's not all beer and skittles. It's a it's a challenging journey. And interestingly enough, as Jen says, all souls will go through the process of enlightenment at some point through the myriad of incarnations that they have. And some people that are incarnated on Earth at the moment come in already enlightened. Some have that experience during a particular incarnation. There have been many enlightened souls that have traversed this earth plane over the eons. And I think it's fairly important to hear from someone that has gone through that process and is still with us in a corporeal form, Jen Ward, what it entailed. And the interesting thing about Jen's story, about her process of enlightenment, is that it is not dissimilar to other experiences of other enlightened souls, incarnated sitters and others that I've read about. And so while each person's process of enlightenment is a little bit unique, there is this formulaic aspect to it, which Jen will describe and I will comment on in the video clip that I'm about to feature. So stick around. It's pretty profound. And if this brings up any issues for you, please consider having a private session with Jen. She's been there, she's done it. She's here to help heal all of humanity one soul at a time. And that's the profound work that we are doing. And please share, please like, subscribe, consider becoming a Jenuine Healing supporter so that the work that we're doing to uplift all of humanity can proceed at an appropriate rate and uplift all of humanity in a time frame that is, that humanity can cope with.
Yeah, we have been working towards doing that. And it's like we've been like whittling it away. And the fact that I could see that it was this close of a trajectory to our future and didn't freak out means that we're in command of the situation. And the work that we're doing, I mean, I don't think I'm just a random person they found to do this energy work. My personal feeling is I've been being groomed for lifetimes to do this. And so when I was plucked by this guy that I didn't know, this sociopath, I call him, to do the work, and then he got really paranoid and he says, all the neighbors are Elohim or, whatever, and that they want you to stay here and do the work. And it was really weird, the experience with the neighbors at this property, because we had nothing to do with them. Nothing. We didn't even see any people until I decided I was going to leave the property on my own. I was going to leave the property and just go home. And as soon as I did that, these neighbors came out of the woodwork, a nice grandmotherly neighbor and she and she started being really nice to me and invited me over for swim parties and whatever. So it was to keep me there. And the neighbors were hard working. And Jason was always trying to figure out, Jason was the sociopath, but, he had his whatever. So he was always trying to figure out how these aliens, because he saw the neighbors as aliens, how they beamed in and out. So he did this weird thing where he'd go into our basement. We had this hot tub. He would lay in the hot tub and wait for them to beam him in and out. Now, I was more, and he got annoyed because in his intuitive sense, he got the sense that they were more interested in me than him. And then he started to get resentful of me that I was stealing his energy. But his job, I think if there was a job or whatever in his mind, it was to keep me there to go through the process of enlightenment. So I went through the process of enlightenment. And then before I went through that process, every single day I had to cut down these woods. There was 13 acres of property. I was working from morning to night, just working and working and working to cut down these trees and make this big pile of wood. And if I stopped working and I would lay down where Jason couldn't see me, the neighbor would come over. And it was like 100-degree weather there in the summer there. And he would say, "Oh no, you got to keep working." He didn't want the other guy to work. It was so weird. You got to keep working. You got to burn off that energy. It's good when you sweat. And so he would keep me moving. And he would come over with his bulldozer and take all these trees and bushes I was cutting down, and he would collect them into a pile in our backyard. And the pile was as huge as like a huge house. It was huge, a huge mansion-sized house, which is really interesting because once it was all collected, we didn't see the neighbors anymore until I went through enlightenment. I went through enlightenment, and after I went through that process, which is a real possible process, what happens is you get scared to death. It was the process of enlightenment happened when he terrified me. I had been working and working and working. He made me take this vinegar and niacin, so I'd have these niacin flushes, which would make me have this rash. That's what it does in niacin flush, and my face was red. And he would tell me that I was evil. And he would tell me that I was Satan personified. And he would tell me I was the reason that there was so much suffering in the world. And he terrified me, and he said I was going to be destroyed. So he pushed me to that point of terror and then left me there and stuff with nowhere to go in my psyche. And then it's hard to describe what happens because it's just this sound, this foreboding sound, like that song when you see Darth Vader come, there was a sound with him. There's a foreboding negative sound, and it kept coming into me and stuff, and it pulled me out of the body. I kept seeing all these horrific things. And then all the horrific things that I saw inwardly, I saw a striptease show by this male dancer who was ejaculating on the audience. I saw this beautiful, beautiful princess being taken into this cage of this beast and raped over and over again. I saw all these inventions. I even saw Disney inventions because Disney, rapes energy through his, whatever. I didn't understand it back then because I was seeing all these evil things, and I was seeing Disney inventions. And then I was seeing this little, beautiful little blonde girl in this huge cage. And these were ways that energy was stolen from her, her innocence was stolen from her. So it's hard for me to see a bird in a cage anymore because it reminds me of that little girl in the cage. And I'm not sure that a bird in a cage isn't doing that. You're stealing that bird's joy. And then I saw this invention where it was like 20 rats in one body, 20 mice in one body. So it had 10 heads and 40 feet or whatever. And it was a ball of rat, and it was trying to run in all different directions at once. And that intention of all these different intentions trying to move together was creating an energy, and something was feeding off of that energy. I saw me in a different body. I was an old man in this ragged loincloth, sitting in a cave which had which was a cell. There were cell bars on it, and there were millions of beings in such a thing. And there was a more influential society above, and we were their septic system. And their shit would literally come through a hole in the wall of this cave I was in, and that would be my sustenance. I had to literally eat shit. So everything that I experienced in those inner realms, I'm sharing now for you. I mean, each one was more horrific than the rest. I'm sharing with you so you don't have to have those yourself. And there was an inner place where I saw the real Darth Vader. And I saw all these operations. It was this cave of industry, and it was like really a lot of activity and such. And sometimes it was a laboratory. But when I went through enlightenment, what enlightenment is actually, it's an actual physiological thing where the ego that's supposed to be just a supportive mechanism in you has become so converted that the only way to get above it is this process of enlightenment where it's pulled out of your body. And so you don't have the ego for a minute. And it happens for like 3 days. And so all this chaos bringing to the point of horror, like you're going crazy and there's nowhere to go. And you sit in that. And there's nowhere to go until it's all lifted and it all stops. And there's silence. So what happens is the ego is pulled out of your beingness. And it's like that way, and then the world is so peaceful. There's no want, there's no need in your body. You can just sit there and just enjoy. It's just so beautiful. And so I went through that process, and the sociopath was watching me. And when the ego left, he was nice to me and just let me go outside now and just let me be calm. There was no more problem. He wasn't afraid of me. He wasn't threatened by me. It was always the ego. And then I sat there and I was just experienced this, and I thought this was my future. But that's not it. That's why enlightenment takes 3 days. The ego is lifted out, and then you have to have it cleansed or whatever happens, but it has to come back in because you can't function in this world without the ego. But hopefully it's more at a tool level again instead of running the show. So I thought I was like living in this peace, and I was happy to be peaceful until I felt the ego come back in, and it's a really scary thing because you think that it feels evil, it feels foreign. When you're in that peace of joy, love, abundance, freedom, health, success, you don't want any of that. You don't want need. It feels really horrible. But this ego has to come back in, and you have to get comfortable with it again. But what was interesting is when I went through enlightenment and all this stuff ended, the inner visions had all dried up. I could still travel. I could still close my eyes, and I was being pushed through a tunnel to different times and spaces. I couldn't stop it. It wouldn't turn off. When I looked at a wall, I would see an image in a spot or something, and that image would start to move, and then I moved out of the body. If people want to get out of the body, that's how you do it. That's the easiest way you get out of the body. Just focus on a spot, some kind of shape, until the shape starts to move and create a picture. And then you move into that picture and you're out of the body. It's that simple. All right. So when I went through enlightenment, the inner chaos cleared up. And what was left was this weird kind of shaft of light in the corner of the room, and it was a negative like pulse, and I didn't want to look at it and stuff. It was over there. I couldn't get rid of it, and it was just this disgusting foreboding pulsing of negative energy. And that stayed around for a while. But then that neighbors who had left me after that big pile of trees and stuff was built up, that night that the ego had left me, he came at night and he burned all the wood, all the workings I had done. And so it was a cleansing. And then I was able to go outside and be in the fire, and it was huge. And it burned all night. And it was burning off something negative in the world. And there's a lot more surreal experiences with that. But I think, I think that's enough for now. Right, babies?
So that's a really profound experience that you had, the process of enlightenment, and just to put things into context, there's a couple of elements of that process of enlightenment that I just want to pick up on and possibly help put it into context for the broader audience that may not be sort of really familiar with this as an idea. So it sounds like the process of enlightenment has a couple of stages. One stage is a quite a horrific path that gets you almost to the point of a precipice, and so that's almost the point that brings you to the brink of insanity, if not insanity itself. And you described that through the experiences that you had, which are very horrific. I mean, you wouldn't wish these kind of experiences on anyone, but that gets you to this kind of precipice. And then you've talked about the point where the ego leaves the body. There's a state of bliss. You said that lasts for 3 days. And then the ego re-enters the body, and that's a bit of a traumatic experience as well. Bingo, that is the process of enlightenment. There's a couple of interesting things that I want to say about that. One is that that process that you described, I'm kind of familiar with that process because I've read about other processes or descriptions of people that have gone through enlightenment, and it's not dissimilar, right? So basically what you're describing seems to be a pattern for the process of enlightenment, right? And so that's a validating thing. As unique and as horrific as your experience of enlightenment was, there seems to be a formula to the process of enlightenment. I sometimes wonder, and I might ask you to comment about this in a second, but I sometimes wonder what happens after enlightenment. So, what is different, what is special, because you're still a living, breathing, incarnated being in a corporeal body, needing to operate within all of the structures of a physical existence. And so that's an interesting topic in and of itself. But the other thing that I'd say about this whole enlightenment story is, if this process of enlightenment is so traumatic and so almost horrific, why do spiritual people think that enlightenment is the holy grail? Because it's almost like, if that's enlightenment, sign me off. No, thank you, right? Because it doesn't sound like a really great experience. And then once you're on the other side of it, what happens then? There's a whole, episode we can do on that. But it's like, a lot of people in the spiritual community laud this idea of enlightenment, but hey, it doesn't sound like a, terribly, you know, uplifting gig. You want to talk about that?
Well, it's not meant to be uplifting. I mean, the fact that humans think that this life is just to, live in this linear, kind of like denial that they're a dynamic spiritual being. That's the delusion, is like you come here just to exist at a very low common denominator, just to die and do it over and over and over again. But those who are awakening get a sense that they are an empowered being, and I wasn't looking for this. I know I was like really passionate about spirituality, but I wasn't looking for this experience. And it's almost like you're compelled to do more, to be more, to be more aware. And so the harder, and this is like leading up to it, who feels like this, the harder I tried to do the right thing, the more the sociopath beat up on me and told me I was bad and whatever. So anytime I tried to move in one direction to correct my behavior to please him, he would jump on me and say, accuse me of being even more evil. So it's like being trapped in the reality of what the human experience really is, without the illusion and denial of, of this lifetime. As far as afterwards, the job afterwards, you're more connected to an inner tribe, the adepts, I call them the adepts. You're more connected to direct knownness, and you can actually feel when your ego is out of sorts or you're acting from ego. And you always stay at the helm. I mean, the ego is a tool. So when you can feel the tool getting out of control, you have to redirect it and stuff. And what's interesting is not only can you see the ego in yourself being out of control, you can see the ego in others operating them. And you can see the universal mind as the collective ego, which it is. And you can see how it's running the collective. And so this information that I accrued through these experiences are the meat and potatoes of what we do here, because these SFT taps are directly intended to dwindle down this ego that's controlling individuals so they can get a glimpse of themselves at higher empowerment and actually become enlightened, hopefully, without the need of such a horrific experience to have it happen.
So my question to you is it even possible to become enlightened without those experiences? Because, look, Jesus went through that kind of a process. I've read accounts of more than one enlightened being describing something similar. So is it even possible to become enlightened in that sense without that? And then the other thing is that a lot of people in the spiritual community consider enlightenment to be the end of the road. And from what I've observed, being married to you and doing the work that we're doing now, is that it is absolutely not the end of the road. In fact, it is probably just one stepping stone of, an infinite number of roads yet to be traveled, and those roads need to be traveled. So if the idea is to, I'll become enlightened in some, beautiful way and, trip out on whatever, drug of choice, and, have a Kundalini experience and, wow, I'm a really spiritual being and now I can sit on my laurels and just, do whatever it is that they think that spirituality is. You probably got it wrong, is my sense of things.
Yes, and I personally think that's the trap of the ego. So you have all these people who they believe that they have awakened, but you see this arrogance in them, and you see a cockiness or a superiority in them. It's not that. Once you see that superiority in another, it's an indication that they're still operating from ego. So what happens, and I've seen this in energy, is it creates this this belief system that they've arrived and you can't tell them nothing. They know everything. So then they shut down to learning, and it keeps them trapped in this kind of desert land, or this maze on the mental realms. And some individuals never get out of there. Now, the people who go through enlightenment, I've had clients go through enlightenment. I had this client I was working with, and she came to me after a couple months and she goes, Jen, I had such an experience that I can't even describe. And I go, I know what happened. She goes, I was touched by God. I go, I know, your ego was lifted up. You stayed that way for 3 days and then it came back and now you're scared of the experiences and that's why you're back to see me. And she was a little bit like surprised that I had known that her experience was. I actually never see her after that because I think she avoids the fact that I have had the experience she has. So in her mind, it makes it less for her. It's not the point for us to have the experience and just go on and live our day that way. The intention is for us to have that experience and share any ways we can help all of humanity get there as well. Or else we're just resting on our laurels and we're becoming stagnant energy at a higher echelon.
So you bring up an interesting point. Is it the goal of people that have gone through enlightenment to bring other people into enlightenment? And before you answer that question, given the the traumatic nature of it, I'm going to suggest, and you might tell me that I'm wrong, that a lot of people just aren't ready for it, even those that are in the woken state, which is another path towards this process of enlightenment. But another viable way to exist in this particular incarnation without going through the kind of enlightenment that you described is to do the kinds of things that we talk about endlessly on this channel, which is living your life of passion and purpose in service of humanity, and experience joy, love, abundance, freedom, health, and success. So what is so special about enlightenment that I can achieve if I'm simply doing what I've just described, live your life of passion and purpose in the service of humanity or the broader collective, living your life of enjoy, love, abundance, freedom, health, success?
Okay, so yes, that's important. Two things is like the reason for enlightenment. It's an absence of control. The ego is a thing of control when it's out of whack. So we can see in the broader scheme of things, the universal ego being out of control and trying to manipulate and subjugate people. So there's that. And the way that people get around it is you've listened to my earlier sessions before I became sweet and met you, and you've seen how ruthless I was on the clients. It's not because I don't love them. It's because I was doing everything in the moment desperately to rip off those tethers of the ego. And I see where the ego is tethered to the individual, what they're proud of, or, what they defend in themselves. Those are actually ties to the ego. So when people say I'm harsh on them, what I'm actually doing is, working at a very high level with a scalpel, cutting those things off. And oh, by the way, when a layer of the ego gets ripped off, it feels very similar. Your higher self is raw under there, and it feels really similar to getting your feelings hurt. It's just the mind is processing having this layer of ego ripped off and having this fresh skin of awakening underneath there. They will process it as a negative because the human has been conditioned to process things as a negative. And so they'll think, oh, Jen's a bitch. She's an asshole. She's so mean, nasty, whatever. She hurt my feelings. No, I'm working so hard with the individual to get them free that I don't have the time in a short session to reassure them that this is the process. Hopefully they'll watch these videos and say, this is the process. But a lot of times when I get clients that have been to readers and psychic and channelers, they don't want to be changed. They don't want to be closer to enlightenment. What they want is an ego gratification, and it just is my pet peeve. Why would someone pay me so much money for a private session and then just sit there and want me to like blow smoke up their ass? I won't do it. So I'll give them the session that they paid for, not the session that they're expecting. Does that make sense?
100%. And I've seen that process unfold in literally close to 1,000 of the private sessions that I've been privy to over the years. And I'm sure there's at least a couple of thousand more that I haven't been privy to. This has been a fascinating conversation. I dare say it's not the last word on this topic, but I'm wondering if we should move into the main menu for today, the main dish on today's menu, which is collapsing the cyborg timeline, a group SFT tapping event.
So the positive news is the very fact that this is something I held within for years and I couldn't even talk about. When I came back from being with the sociopath and going through enlightenment, I was terrified to do energy work because it was too overwhelming. All this was too terrifying. So the very fact that I got over myself and was offering this help to others is a miracle. And the very fact that we're doing this, and with your technology, babies, we can get this out to 8 billion people if they're able to find us, so that those who are suffering alone, feeling they're going insane and they don't have any purpose, get a better understanding of where they are, and they can actually reach out to me in energy, and I can support them.
Hi, and thanks for watching another one of our videos. All our content is available on social media and streamed in high definition, ad-free on the Jenuine Healing website. If you appreciate the work that we're doing and you love the content we're creating, please consider becoming a Jenuine Healing supporter. Simply follow the link in the description below, select your level of support, and know that your financial contribution is directly helping us continue our profound work in healing all of humanity, one soul at a time. Thanks for your support. Look forward to catching you next time, and bye for now.